Welcome to Zero Knowledge, a podcast where we explore the latest in blockchain technology and the decentralized web. The show is hosted by me, Anna.
And me, Frederick. In this episode, Anna sits down with Sunny to talk about his journey to Cosmos, a bit about that protocol, and his work as a blockchain validator.
Today, I'm sitting with Sunny from Cosmos. How's it going, Sunny?
Going well. How are you doing?
Very good. So I say Sunny from Cosmos, but would you say, like, are you Sunny from Cosmos, or are you Sunny the validator, or are you Sunny the podcast host?
I guess a little bit of all, but I like to. I would say my head is mostly in Cosmos and everything else I do is just validator. I'm trying to help Cosmos as much as possible, and in Epicenter, it helps me learn, and so all that learning goes back into improving Cosmos.
And we're sitting here actually in New York during Blockchain Week. There is a little bit of noise in the background you may or may not hear. So how was your week, Sunny?
My week was pretty great. Yeah, New York Blockchain Week was a little bit, stressful. Like, lots of running around and stuff. But overall, I love I love New York. I grew up in New Jersey, and so this is like my city.
Nice. Were you here last year?
Yeah, I've been here for the past 2 years.
How does it compare?
Way quieter. Like last year was like insane. This year it's much emptier.
I think it was so much saner.
Mm-hmm. No year. Lambos outside this year.
No Lambos. People have been humbled, but people are optimistic. So what I realized in setting up this interview with you is I don't actually know that much about your background. Where did you start?
Sure. I guess, you could say I first learned about blockchain like in high school. I heard about Dogecoin sponsoring the Jamaican bobsled team.
Wow.
And I just thought, what? And so I kind of looked into it. I didn't really think. And then there's this guy, senior year of high school. There's a really scammy project that people may have heard of. It's called Veritasium. It's like kind of made it into the top 40 during like peak 2017, like super weird scammy project. But that guy, Reggie Middleton, I think his name was, he kind of like, I was at a hackathon senior year high school, and he was kind of like going on about, it was in New York where we are now, and he was kind of going on about like, oh, Bitcoin is going to be like the next big thing. And so when I got to Berkeley, so I went to school in UC Berkeley, I was studying computer science and political economy. And so I kind of remembered what he was talking about Bitcoin, and I was like, okay, this seems like a cool combination of these two fields. And I was generally kind of pretty libertarian-ish and stuff. And so there was a small Bitcoin club at Berkeley, only like 5-6 people. And so I went there, and I had no clue what was going on, because they were just like, they were talking about like something about the ring signatures in Monero, and it was just like whoosh, way over my head.
You jumped in like at a very advanced level.
Yeah, so I have no clue what's going on, but somehow I felt a little bit smarter by osmosis. I felt smarter being in the room with them. And so I just kind of kept going. And then what I did was next year, I started teaching a class on Bitcoin. Me and 2 friends from that small club. And we just said, my strategy when I want to learn something is I'll sign up to teach it, because then I better learn it. And so I did the same thing. I taught a class on Switzerland once, just because I wanted to learn about Switzerland.
That's nice.
Yeah, I like teaching. So through that, I kind of learned about it. Back then, we were all like very, very Bitcoin maximalists, like that entire club.
So this wasn't blockchain at Berkeley.
No, this was like the predecessor of
Berkeley.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so keep in mind, this club was like 5-6 people. And it was mostly just a bunch of people just like hanging out, like getting dinner and just like talking about like Bitcoin, just like, oh, what's Roger Ver up to these days? And like,
what year was that roughly?
2015.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then what happened was after that class, we started teaching that class, we got about 60 students the first semester. And from that, we kind of had this idea like, oh, what if we like turn, first off, we realized like, okay, half the stuff we talk about isn't Bitcoin. We started talking about like, Monero, and Zcash was just coming out at that time. And back then we were much more interested in privacy. Like scalability is like, oh, okay, whatever, that's cool. But like, for some reason we were all like really into like Bitcoin mixers and stuff. So Zcash was coming out at that time. So then we're like, okay, we don't talk about Bitcoin half the time. Let's just rename it to blockchain at Berkeley. And let's just like scrap that old club. Let's just start a brand new club and just, let's make this like a cool, we saw there wasn't many big blockchain clubs in universities. The biggest was probably the one at the MIT Bitcoin Club. Other than that, there really wasn't too many. So we're like, all right, let's make this like the center of blockchain education on the West Coast.
I didn't actually realize that you were part of the sort of founding of blockchain at Berkeley.
Yeah, it was.
And that's funny because it wasn't a program; it was a club.
Yeah,
but a lot of you are now working in it.
Yeah.
Did you finish your degree?
No, I didn't. So.
Oh, you're one of those.
I'm one of those. Yeah. What happened was summer after sophomore year, I was interning at Consensus for a little bit. Wasn't a huge fan. I don't know. I just kind of want to work more protocol layer stuff. They were much more application layer at the time. I think the Pegasus team didn't quite exist at that time. It was just getting started. So I worked on like their Consensus Academy stuff, and I worked on this cool project they call Aetherium. But kind of halfway through the summer, I kind of just like stopped showing up, and I told them like, hey, I'm going to switch to like part time or something. But that summer, I met this guy Nate Rush, who was also interning at Consensus with me, and he and I kind of just got like obsessed with proof of stake. So that summer, I was living in New York, but I feel I didn't enjoy it because two reasons: one, I wasn't 21, but two. Me and Nate just spent every evening that summer just like reading white papers. Like we didn't do anything else. And I'm like, so that's kind of why I want to move back to New York, because like I need to enjoy it this time.
Well, it sounds like you did something productive, but I hear you. It's like you missed the experience.
Yeah, the classic New York lifestyle. I don't know if it's
might
a
be
thing.
overrated.
Probably. Yeah, so we started just really deep diving into proof of stake together. And so we started reading a lot of Vlad stuff and Vitalik stuff and Jay stuff. And so while doing that, I kind of saw Tendermint and I'm like, oh, wow, what a nice, like, practical implementation of proof of stake that I can think can actually like work pretty quickly. And then Nate was more like, oh no, this like Casper CBC is this most beautiful, elegant thing mankind has ever created. And then your friendship ended. Yeah.
I hope that's not the case.
No. We run a tiny little podcast together still.
Good.
Yeah. So he actually started reach out to Vlad and started working with Vlad directly on Casper CBC. And I reached out to Tendermint and I'm like, hey, I know you guys are doing some cool proof of stake stuff. How can I get involved with you there?
When was that roughly?
2017.
Mid?
Yeah, so summer 2017, so June 2017. Like before that, the whole Cosmos fundraiser, like I wasn't part of that or anything. Max Fang pointed out the fundraiser to me once. And like I said, keep in mind, back then we were all super Bitcoin maximalists. And so I looked at it and I'm like, oh, proof of stake. Psh, that thing doesn't work.
Whoa.
Yeah, we were it was like that. We had like a talk about like I think for the class we had a lecture on scalability.
Yeah.
And 90% of it was on Lightning and stuff. And we were like, oh, increasing block time, decreasing the block time. That's insane. How could you ever even think of doing that?
Wow. So from there, you joined Cosmos. What was Cosmos like at that time? Had they just done the fundraise?
Yeah, so it was like a month or two after the fundraiser just happened. And so we were kind of, back then, we had told people we would launch the Cosmos Hub mainnet by Q4 2017.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Really?
we were like, oh, we can just knock this out easy.
My goodness.
It turns out that didn't quite happen. And so, but at that time, it was pretty small. I think I was like maybe the 8th person to join the team, I think. So just much smaller. The team was much smaller than it is today. And it was pretty cool. Like, I just felt like I was learning a lot. I mean, Jim Yang, who's like the head of strategy there right now, he's kind of the one who brought me on. And, he was like teaching me, and I got to learn a lot from Jay and Ethan. And then come the end of the summer, I was just like, wow, this is just such a great learning experience. I think I learned more in the last month than I did in like while in school. So it's like, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to drop out and join this full time.
Do you think that, so I mean, I've met a bunch of people in the space who have dropped out.
Yeah.
I personally don't think it's the greatest thing for everyone. But in your case, like, do you regret leaving school?
No. I mean, I think universities have 3 purposes, which is education, community, and degree or signaling. I think education is free if you want it. Like, I've been taking a lot of edX and Coursera courses, taking on like game theory, cryptography, taking a great one called Economics of Money and Banking. It's given me so much more sympathy for fiat currencies.
Wow.
Like, I feel like no one should be allowed to talk about like economics of cryptocurrencies until they take this course.
Cool. Where is that?
It's on Coursera from Columbia University. So great course.
Cool.
And so, yeah, education's free. Then the community, I think community is probably the most valuable aspect of university. This is why I continue to still live in the city of Berkeley even after dropping out. And so I'd still like, keep attending blockchain at Berkeley events. I'd still go like sit in on lectures. I'd go hang out. Like, we have a Cosmos office in Berkeley, but oftentimes I'll just go to the library to like the school library to work so I can meet people there and stuff.
Yeah. But also it sounds like because you were part of that group, you kind of had the benefit of the community already.
Yeah. So I would say I couldn't have done that unless I at least was there for that first 2 years, right? So join, get bootstrap your community there and then leave.
Unless a degree is necessary for what you want to do.
Yeah. So like, there are some people who like some fields where like a degree is really necessary.
Or, I mean, the other thing is it sounds like you found out what you wanted to do very young.
Yeah.
Like, in my experience, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it took me a lot longer. And I'm actually pretty happy I have a degree because in my search, I was able to do a lot of jobs because I had a degree. Mm-hmm. And that definitely allowed me then find what I wanted to do. So, but I think in your case, if you know what you want to do, then it makes sense.
Right. I mean, that's a good point. Like, I don't know. I know what I want to do right now. Who knows how that changes in 5 years or not?
When you decide to become a professional gardener, you may need to go back to school for
horticulture.
Horticulture, exactly. Okay.
Berkeley actually has a really good horticulture program, by the way. It's like a state school, so it actually has like the government mandate that it has to teach agriculture and mining.
Like mining.
Like rock mining.
Not blockchain mining.
No.
That term has totally changed its meaning for me.
We could probably, I wonder if we can like convince them to switch it to like, learning blockchain mining instead.
Might be more profitable.
Yes, yeah.
Now, I think what we understand of your story is like where you started, what started to get you interested. You started working at Cosmos. Mm-hmm. Already we hear kind of like your philosophy had changed. Like you had been sort of a maximalist and then you started to be open to proof of stake stuff.
Yeah.
Would you say like, did that switch in your philosophy happen before Cosmos or did it happen during Cosmos? Like, did you join at all skeptical and then it changed or like what? Yeah.
I think what happened was at some point near the end of my sophomore year in maybe spring 2017, I kind of started to be more open to Ethereum. Someone from Digix DAO came and gave a talk about Ethereum, and that was the first time. So, fun fact, here's my first experience with Ethereum. There was a hackathon in summer 2016 that I was at with a friend, and I told him that, hey, I heard about this Ethereum thing. Like, I heard it's a blockchain, but I heard you can build applications on it. Let's look at it. And so at this hackathon, the first thing we do is pull up reddit.com/r/Ethereum, and the entire front page is, OMG, the DAO just got hacked and the world is burning. We got a fork.
Wow.
So I found out of Ethereum during the DAO attack. And I just these guys are talking about like hard forking and stuff. I'm like, all right, these people are insane. I turned it off and didn't look at Ethereum again for another 9 months. So then finally when that Digix DAO guy came, he kind of finally re-exposed me to Ethereum after that. And so I'm like, okay, this Ethereum thing is really cool. And so then that, like I said, then I started interning at Consensus that summer. And so I was getting really into Ethereum. Then I think at Consensus 2017, I met David Vorick from Saya. And I think I asked him about why is Saya still running on its own blockchain while Storj is kind of switching to using Ethereum, and isn't everyone switching to Ethereum nowadays? That's just a hot thing. And so he kind of pitched me on why application specific blockchains make sense and why ASICs are actually good. And So, that just got me really thinking, he kind of put the seeds of doubt of Ethereum in me, and like this whole, we talked about this last time I was on the podcast, but like Ethereum empire and stuff. And so he kind of sowed those seeds for me. And so like I said, I was thinking about this multi-chain world, but then I reached out to Tendermint with the focus of mostly just working on proof of stake. I didn't even know that the Tendermint team was the same as the Cosmos team. But when I reached out to them, they said, "Oh yeah, we work on this thing called Cosmos." And so when they explained it to me, two things crossed my mind. Like, one, okay, that sounds exactly in line with what like David was saying, and it seems to make sense with me. And two, I'm like, okay, finally, this is like the application layer for Bitcoin. I got into it because I want Bitcoin to be the money chain and then BTC flows out of that chain and into all of these other chains and acts as the primary currency on many different applications. And then we don't have to pollute the Bitcoin chain with all of these applications, which is what kind of happens with Ethereum. And that's kind of how I first started approaching Cosmos. Might be a little bit still how I approached a little bit as well, but I think I've become a way less Bitcoin maximalist. So I do see the necessity or benefits of a little bit more base currencies and stuff than just Bitcoin.
So far, we've never done an episode really on Cosmos. What we've done is we've done an episode with Ethan on testnets when you guys were running, or I don't know if you had really announced it yet, but you were about to do the game of stakes. Yeah. And we were talking about testnets and value-bearing testnets. And I'm pretty sure he would have shared with us a very brief description of Cosmos. But now that it's launched, how do you describe Cosmos?
Cosmos is, I think the best way to describe it is it's somewhat of a rejection of the Ethereum development frame style, where it says, let's put all applications on a single chain. Cosmos basically says, okay, smart contracting platforms are great for what they sound like. Smart contracting. If I'm making a short-term smart contract with you, I'm like, a bet or an escrow contract, or ICOs were the perfect use case for smart contracts because they're short-term use and they need high levels of customizability. That's what Ethereum was meant for, in my opinion. When you start to build more complex applications, we're talking DEXs, prediction markets, like MakerDAO, like these kind of much more complexity-based applications, I think that's where Ethereum starts to kind of fall apart a little bit, or it can't scale both technically but also socially when it comes to who decides what upgrades to make to Ethereum. And there's so many conflicting EIPs and stuff, and it's like how you upgrade Ethereum becomes a social challenge. And I don't think the Bitcoin people's way of solving it is correct either, which is, we're never going to change anything. So our strategy is sort of say, okay, if we can put all of these applications on their own chain and they kind of have sovereignty over their own chain. And this is kind of what David was telling me about. He was saying like, there was like this fear of ASICs in the Saya community, and their community was able to coordinate to fork out those ASICs. And that's something they could do because they were a smaller community with heavily aligned interests. And so that's kind of where Cosmos comes at it, where we say, okay, these larger applications, whether it's a DEX or something, we should put it on its own specialized chain. But as long as it's still able to interoperate with the rest of the ecosystem, that's the nice two things that Ethereum did really well and nailed. One is the composability, where it said, I can go buy a CryptoKitty using my MakerDAI on the 0x DEX, right? Like that's something you couldn't do before Ethereum. And so that's where Cosmos' whole interoperability comes in. I want to be able to compose different applications together. And then the other thing Ethereum did was it made it really easy. Solidity is not the nicest language in the world, but I've done a lot of it. It's not that bad anymore. It's getting better and better. And it's way better than dealing with the spaghetti code like that is the C++ Bitcoin Core client. And so it made it way easier for developers to write more complex applications. Because of that, we got much more diversity in applications. Pre-Ethereum, all blockchain applications were like Bitcoin or Litecoin or Dogecoin,
or send private money.
Exactly, yeah. The few that tried to do something different was like Namecoin, right? But it was a fork of the Bitcoin core code base, and it just it's very badly architected for its use case. So Ethereum made that easier. And so that's kind of the two things Cosmos is kind of do is basically say, okay, we want that social and technical scalability that was somewhat present in generation 1, but that's while maintaining those nice benefits from generation 2, which was the composability and ease of development.
The early Ethereum idea was the world computer, and that you'd be able to run all sorts of applications on it. Is that more in line with what you guys have planned now? That you would run applications? I mean, you mentioned these sort of different chains, but is the overarching goal this sort of idea of a world computer?
So I don't like the term world computer. That's actually probably the main issue. Saying that we can have a singular world computer, that sounds unscalable to me. We actually did an Epicenter episode with Mark Miller from Agoric just last week. And so I think he nailed it when, he started talking about like, what we really need is BFT computers. That doesn't mean the BFT is world scale, but at the end of the day, these blockchains are just third parties, but they're highly decentralized third parties and therefore somewhat more secure, maybe. But, if we're trying to settle something between us, we're kind of saying, okay, instead of having a third party escrow, we'll use this blockchain third party as an escrow. And so, does that mean that? And so what you really are going to have is a world of many BFT computers that are all connected to each other. And that's kind of where like the Internet of Blockchains catchphrase of Cosmos comes in, where it's like, we don't want a single world computer. That's crazy. We want many BFT computers that are connected in a worldwide network.
When you think of like the sort of ETH 2.0 and the shards, is that at all related to what you're thinking about? What's the difference between Cosmos and ETH 2.0?
Well, one thing with ETH 2.0 is it still continues this idea of still using the EVM, or whether it's WebAssembly, but some common VM that's really designed for smart contracting. And then it also kind of says, ETH 2.0 says all of the shards in ETH 2.0 kind of have common security, where they have to use they all have the same security requirements, which makes sense in the Ethereum world. I think it makes actually a little bit less sense in Polkadot. But in Ethereum, it makes sense because all of these shards are, if you want a highly secure smart contracting platform, and smart contracts are interacting with other smart contracts on other chains, on other shards, maybe they should have somewhat equivalent security, because they're supposed to be homogeneous. Cosmos, on the other hand, and Polkadot as well, are kind of really focused more on heterogeneous chains and shards, right? Where they're application specific. One shard might be CryptoKitties and the other shard might be MakerDAO. I think we'd agree that those probably don't need equivalent security. And the CryptoKitties people are overpaying for security. That's why their fees are higher when they shouldn't be paying that much for security. They're overpaying. And so that's where Cosmos kind of approaches it, where we say, no, these different chains don't need equivalent security. And so we allow them to either figure out their own security model by doing sovereign chains, whether they want to use permission validator sets or proof of stake or even proof of work if they wanted to. They can figure out their own security, or they can ask the Cosmos Hub to lease security. But that's also done in a more kind of diversified way, designed for heterogeneous chains. Where even in Polkadot, where they kind of have the similar idea, but there, all of the parachains kind of have to have equivalent security, which I think is kind of missing the point when you're getting into a world of heterogeneous chains. In Cosmos, we can have different chains, even that are doing some level of shared security, still have different levels of security.
How are the chains connected? Actually, what are they called in Cosmos? What are the different? Are they chains?
We call them zones. Not a biggest fan of the term. I mean, I just call them chains or zones or side chains.
Okay, so how do you connect the chains in Cosmos?
So what we've done is we've created a protocol called Inter-Blockchain Communication, or IBC. And essentially, at the end of the day, it's a fancy way of saying sidechains. Sidechains are not a new concept. I think Blockstream proposed them back in 2014. It's just the idea of I can do SPV or light client proofs of one chain in another chain. So I can prove something about the state of another chain. And so there have been many side chains that have existed, right? One is BTC Relay, which is a one-way side chain from Bitcoin to Ethereum. There's Parity Bridges, which is to talk to other EVM chains. What IBC is really trying to do, two things. One, this light client protocol becomes really expensive when you're doing two proof of work chains. I think the BTC Relay, because what happens is when proof of work, you have to transmit every single block header to sync the chain. And I think the BTC Relay contract I think no one's been transmitting headers in like months. And so you can't actually use BTC Relay because it hasn't been synced up to the mainnet. And to sync it up to the mainnet would take so much gas right now on Ethereum that I don't think it's worth it for anyone to do it altruistically. And so one thing that Tendermint or BFT protocols do in general, but actually more specifically Tendermint, is it provides a very efficient light client proof where you can quickly skip blocks as long as the validator set doesn't change by more than a third in a block. And so that means we could probably jump like thousands of blocks at a time because if the validator set like isn't going through too much of churn. Which is one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of like sortition-based stuff that change the validator set every block, because now you made the light client very expensive again. So because of this much more efficient light clients, we are able to actually do this IBC sidechains protocol in a much more efficient way. The second thing that we're trying to do here is...
Oh, wait, before you go on, the light client, so what you just described, it's like you don't have to verify each one. You can skip for the light client. What does that mean exactly? Like, what are you...
Yeah.
Maybe describe what a light client is in this capacity.
Sure. So a light client is basically saying, I'm not running a full node. I'm only syncing the headers of a chain, and then I can use Merkle proofs to know that something happened in that chain that I wanted to happen.
Yeah,
And-
we've actually covered light clients generally on the podcast, but what you just described is like are you even skipping? You're not even registering all the headers.
Yes.
So this is a unique light client.
Yes.
Okay.
So because what happens in proof of work, let's say let's say I went home at night and I turned off my phone and I turn it on in the morning again. Overnight, there's been 6 times 8, so 48 Bitcoin blocks that came overnight. My phone takes about, I've tested it, I can do about 3 to 4 SHA-256 hashes per second. So that means it'll take my phone still at least over 10 seconds just to sync the Bitcoin block headers that came overnight. And that's Bitcoin, which has very infrequent blocks and a very easy hashing algorithm. I actually haven't taken the time to measure it for Ethereum yet. But ETH hash is a much more complex hashing algorithm that's more expensive and does blocks every 15 seconds. So it might, I don't want to say this is true, but it might take my phone a minute just to sync that. What Tendermint does is what happens is every block, the validator set from this block signs on the validator set of the next block. And so at a certain time, you may have a trusted validator set who, that you synced up the chain and they got to this point legitimately. Then you go offline and come back like 5 days later. If the validator set hasn't changed by more than a third, that means at least 2/3 of your last trusted validator set is still in the current validator set, and you can see their signatures on the next validator set as well. And so you can say, okay, at least 2/3 of my last trusted validator set is approving of the current validator set. So that means I can
trust it.
I can trust it. And so I can skip all the blocks that came in the last 5 days. I don't have to sync all of those headers.
So, but how does the light client and the IBC actually interact? What's the connection?
What you'll be doing is in the state machine of chain B, you'll be running a light client of chain A.
I see.
And so that's why what will happen is I can take a token or something on chain A and lock it up in a special, I'll call it a smart contract, in a special spot in the smart contract in the state machine. And then I submit a light client proof to chain B saying, hey, look, here's proof, cryptographic proof based on the header and a Merkle proof that I've locked my token away. And then chain B will mint you a token saying, oh, this is a claim to the underlying locked asset on chain A. And I can do whatever I want with this claim. I can send it to someone, I can do whatever. And whoever has access to it, they can then go back, and what they can do is they can burn it on chain B in a special burning contract or something. And they can submit like client proof of that burning to chain A, and it will unlock that locked token and give it back to them.
And what you just described is a bridge.
Yes.
We had POA Network on, we had Igor on. We actually had a big conversation about bridges.
Yes.
And it sounded very similar. He said that there was two ways of doing it. You could either mint and burn.
Yeah.
Or what was the other thing he did? There was like lock and unlock.
I mean, if it's lock and unlock, that's necessary when two chains maybe are relatively separate with each other. Mint and burn makes more sense when there's people, because you don't want to burn the original asset. You only want to lock it. If you burn it, that might make sense in an Ethereum-like system where like all the shards are kind of, the master shard, we just assume all of them have similar security, and that like, the entire system is like secure in the same way, so it's okay to like allow the accounting to be a little bit more loose. In Cosmos, where chains might not trust, my BFT computer might not trust the BFT computer that you're using, and so we need more guarantees and like accountability, like keeping track of like that. Yeah, so making sure we lock it rather than burning it is important.
So you guys do the lock. You don't, but didn't you just say you mint and burn on the clients?
We lock the asset on chain A. Mint an asset on B.
Okay.
Burn on B. Unlock on A.
I see. And so that was what I think Igor had said, something like that. He was like, you can either do mint and burn, mint and burn, lock and unlock.
Yeah.
Unlock. Unlock and lock and unlock. Those were like the options.
Yeah.
And you guys are doing, so is it always like directional? It's like if you are moving funds from one to another, it's always going to be lock and unlock on the chain that it's moving from, and then mint and burn on the one it goes to?
Yeah. When we're talking about assets here, right?
Okay.
Token transfers. IBC is pretty, generalized. The sidechains paper from Bitcoin, from Blockstream, they were really focused just on assets, and that's where we started as well. So that's kind of why we still use that sidechains terminology rather than bridges, because we came from that Bitcoin mindset there. Okay. But IBC is, like I said, all you're doing is proving some state to another. So token transfers and asset transfers are the easiest thing to start with, but you can start doing more complex things. For example, let's say you have two EVMs on two different chains. You can, in theory, do a smart contract call from one chain to another. I personally am not a fan of that. One, because, no one's really figured out what the design of that will look like. And, the ETH 2.0 people are kind of working through that stuff right now. But I think there's, maybe better designed VMs for that purpose. And so one of the ones that, I'm really interested in and we're working closely with is a project called Agoric. And so they kind of have this very fascinating smart contracting VM that allows, it's basically object capability based security, which is super interesting to me. And I think it is the right way of doing cross-chain like contract and stuff.
When you talk about, so you kind of mentioned the comparison to ETH2. You hinted at a comparison to Polkadot. What you've described, I mean, in what you described as the difference, you said that the difference has to do with this: do you need generalized security, or can you have chains of different security levels? Yep. Like you sort of described. So like some chains, like the CryptoKitties chain, maybe doesn't need the same levels of security as the Maker chain. Mm-hmm. But what happens if you're interacting between these two? Like, what if you were able to sort of corrupt the CryptoKitty one, and then you would basically lock, what would you do in that case? You'd lock a CryptoKitty token and you'd send it to a more secure one, and it would mint on the more secure chain, it would still mint it. Yeah. It's like, is there any way, like, wouldn't that then mean that the bridge itself could be an attack vector?
Yes. And so that's why what happens is you have to have trust. So when a token moves across the system, it kind of, you have to trust all of the chains which it goes through. And that's why I like to avoid saying that you mint the asset on the same asset on the other chain. I like to say you mint a claim to the asset on the other chain. So what happens is when I locked a CryptoKitty on one chain and I minted that CryptoKitty on the other chain, I didn't mint a CryptoKitty to that chain. I minted a claim to that underlying CryptoKitties. And so that by using that terminology of a claim, I think it instills to people that you also still have to trust that original CryptoKitties chain, because if there's no underlying CryptoKitty, then your claim is also like useless.
But like, what if there's a chain that I don't have any control over, which is bridged to like my chain?
Yeah.
Can I? The bridge already exists. Can I prevent them from doing that, from minting on my chain?
If you can prove that a chain has gotten corrupted, you can submit that proof to the bridge, and it will close the bridge. But no, I mean, you let's say that hasn't happened yet, and they can still continue to mint assets on your chain, and just say your users have to be aware that that's not, that has a security requirement there. One of the things the Cosmos Hub helps with is it keeps some sorts of invariance between chains. So it prevents chains from double spending other chains. So let's say the hub is connected to many zones as well as the Bitcoin blockchain. BTC might flow into the Cosmos Hub and into Chain A. Chain A, what it should do, if users want to go to Chain B, instead of sending BTC to Chain B directly, now you have a path that's like Chain B, Chain A, Hub, and Bitcoin. You have to trust all those 4 chains. What you should instead do is withdraw the claim from Chain A back to the Hub, and then send it to Chain B. So you should try to shorten the path whenever possible, so there's less to trust. And the hub keeps track saying that, I know that there's only 5 BTC on Chain A right now. So even if Chain A gets corrupted, then only, Chain A can't send out 10 BTC.
Can't double spend.
Yeah, it only has 5 BTC. So, the users who have on Chain A, maybe they might get defrauded, but the overall network doesn't collapse just because one chain gets defrauded.
You just mentioned the hub.
Mm-hmm.
What we should do here is explain to the listeners what the pieces of the Cosmos network are. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the hub.
Yeah.
You mentioned the IBC.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try to create a map, like a visual map for people. Or actually, it would be an auditory map because we don't have any visuals.
Sure. So essentially, what will happen is you'll have chains that can set up an IBC connection to any other chain they want that also supports IBC. So IBC, your chain has to natively support IBC. It's something you have to build into the system.
And this, in other contexts, would be the bridges.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, just like any airport in the world can theoretically fly to any other airport in the world, for practical matters, what we end up seeing in basically any network system is you see hub and spoke like architectures begin to arise. And so this is
like hub and spork.
Yeah. And so this is what the purpose of hubs is in the system. Is it helps reduce the number of IBC connections or bridges in the network from order of n squared to n, right? And that doesn't mean that there's a singular hub. That means that there will be a couple of hubs that are connected to each other and then are connected to many chains that kind of use the hub. So these hubs in the system, there's already 2 hubs that are in the Cosmos system. There's one called the Cosmos Hub, which is, I agree, a terrible and confusing name. And then there's another one called Iris Hub. And so what these hubs should be they're also application-specific blockchains. And their application is being optimized for transmitting IBC packets. And that's like what they are focused on. And other features that they can provide as hubs, such as providing these shared security features and whatnot to their patron chains, let's call them.
Cool. I really like your use of the metaphor of the airports, because that definitely, you can sort of visualize that somehow.
Yeah.
Right now you said there's 2.
Mm-hmm.
Are they different? Like, can they be unique in their construction, or are they sort of replicas of one another?
Yeah, they can be unique. Right now, the Iris team it's pretty similar to the Cosmos Hub. I mean, they do have some big changes. One of the main changes is that they really wanted automatic software upgrades. And so, like we discussed last time when I was on the Cosmos Hub, I generally don't want the ability to have automatic software upgrades. So that's already one of the main existing differences between these two hubs. And then Iris is really focused more, I would say they're a little bit more on the enterprisey side, while Cosmos Hub is maybe a little bit more cypherpunky. I don't know if that's, I don't know, I like to see it that way at least. Also, Iris is really heavily focused in China. And so, people often think like, oh, Neo is the Chinese Ethereum and, the Chinese blank, right? I think it's actually really interesting because I'm worried about that Great Firewall of China. And if that firewall starts censoring packets going over it, then I do not want to do Tendermint consensus over that firewall because, maybe you could do it over Tor or something, but it'll be really slow. What I'd rather have is a major hub inside of China and a major hub outside of China that they have their own little ecosystems, and you're doing Tendermint consensus separately, and then they can send IBC packets to each other over the firewall through whether it's Tor or some of the Bitcoiners are working on like these cool stuff where you can like transmit over like long range radio networks and stuff. So,
but this is a different that would be much smaller. I guess what you'd have to between the hubs, the communication could be a lot smaller.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the premises where we come from, where is a notion of locality. Like that's kind of one of the premises of the whole application-specific blockchains is that in an application, most of the transactions stay within that application, and then the minority are elsewhere. That's kind of one of the problems with, I think the ETH 2.0 kind of design is where, let's say you're randomly interacting with another contract on Ethereum, on ETH 2.0, and let's say that, for example, there's 10 shards. There's a 90% chance that the contract you're interacting with is on another shard, and the interchain communication is the bottleneck. So when you have application-based specific systems, it's like, let's say a DEX. Most of the transactions are probably trading on the DEX, and the minority are probably deposits and withdrawals from the DEX. And so that, that helps. And then the other kind of locality is geographical locality. I'm a big believer in, and so is Ethan Buckman. He's the really one who got this idea into me, was about localized blockchains. Most of the financial transactions you do probably every day are people in your close geographical proximity. I go out, buy lunch, and most of that from in a single town or maybe neighbor, like even sometimes a neighborhood, and so you can get way more locality that way.
One thing I'm not really clear on is since these, to me, these are independent blockchains that you're talking about. The hub are also blockchains, right? Mm-hmm. So how are they actually localized? Are they not decentralized as well? Do they not have their own nodes and node operators that are spread out all over? I don't quite understand how there's a Chinese node or a Chinese hub.
Yeah. So we could be talking on two layers. We could be talking on the user layer, and we can be talking about the consensus layer. And so first, from the user layer, let's say that that's kind of where that locality of transactions comes in, where if there's, let's say we're in New York City right now, right? We have NYC chain, right? Where it's just for payments within New York City. If all the users, people who are actually making transactions and, we all have accounts on the New York City chain, we're just moving money quickly in the New York City chain and very few transactions are going to other chains. So that's kind of what I mean by user locality. Maybe the blockchain nodes could be geographically distributed, for example, but the users of the chain, everyone who has accounts on that, might still be localized. Mm-hmm. Now you can also take it a step further and localize the consensus layer. Say all the validator nodes have to be somewhat localized as well. So, Tendermint, it becomes faster. It's limited by the speed of light, right? And how fast nodes can communicate. So if we can move stuff closer and all the chains in a localized area, then we can actually, that helps as well. And, I'm a fan of this idea of, one of the nice things about Cosmos in the sovereign chains is you can have additional requirements beyond just proof of stake. So let's say a town could say, oh, the validators of this chain have to be New York City residents. Or I helped this project called Liberland. It's just like little joke country, like micronation.
It's like a strip of land next to a river. Somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Right between Serbia and Croatia. I actually visited it once, which is cool. And so, I helped them out with some like blockchain stuff. And, I was telling them like, what you could do is have your system be proof of stake, but it also, to be a validator, you also have to be a Liberland citizen. That seems to make sense. And you can, and I think it actually gives you higher security than if you didn't have it, because I think sometimes like crypto econ people think that economics or security is the only thing that matters, when in reality, people have political and social motivations, right? And so if all the people are Liberland citizens, maybe they're less likely to want to attack the system.
And I'm trying to picture, so like say you have you have a tiny localized blockchain. I mean, the thing that's a bit scary here, though, is like, what if you're so localized down to like 5 of your friends? And you all ran the same nodes. I mean, this is kind of going back to that idea of like a corrupted.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious of is like, how does an IBC get built, and like, do you prevent some of those from being built? Like, because like, what if me and 5 friends, or like me alone, my local computer, I have the node, it's one node, it's my blockchain, and I do all sorts of double spending stuff, and I try to like interact with it. You sort of mentioned that there's like almost like a court system or something that would knock it down, but like before you know that I'm malicious, can I build an IBC? Can I build a bridge?
Yeah, but all the only funds that would be at risk there are funds that users willingly put onto that chain. So if it's just a chain with you and 5 friends, it's probably only people who are probably going to be using that is you and your 5 friends. And that's okay. That makes sense. Like, people say that like, we're going to use Lightning to settle transactions between our friends. And Lightning just assumes that there is zero trust that exists in the entire world, and thus makes it actually very expensive to transact. And, if I just have a group of my friends, like, I can make a little side chain for ourselves and we can just do all of our transactions there. And, I have trust in the majority of my friends. So out of my 10 friends, I assume at least 5 of them are honest, right? And, if that's not the case, I should probably go find better friends.
But what would happen if like, I'm not worried about the chain itself where I do the double spending.
Yeah.
Or the 5 friends do the double spending. I'm more like when you start pushing it, kind of going back to that other question, when you push it towards these other chains.
Yeah. But so let's say
this is what I want to understand this. Like, so say I do it. Let's go through the steps. I create an IBC. I'm allowed. I bridge to somewhere. I do the lock and unlock on my chain. I mint on another.
What token are we locking and unlocking? Is there any chain?
Let's say I make a token that's super generalized.
Just a brand new token.
It's a brand new token.
Yeah.
I guess the trick is here, like, I need to have some value in it.
Yeah. I can't mint BTC on my chain.
Okay. So I have to have a chain. So then I see what you're saying. It's like, I get 5 friends. We have a little mini economy. Yeah. It has very minor value.
Yeah.
But I lock it on my chain. I double spend. I lock and unlock. All right. Well, in this case, lock. I mint on a new chain. I get that money. I do something with it.
Yeah.
And then it turns out it's faulty. It's total bullshit. I like disappear.
Because that original 5-person chain faulted somehow.
Yes.
And so when you're using a token on another chain that came at it over IBC, you should be able to see where this token originated from. And if you don't trust the origin chain, then you shouldn't be using this token. So if I don't trust Bitcoin's like root chain, I should not be using BTC on any other chain, because the original chain might just fault and destroy my value. Same thing here with, that token that was issued by me and my 4 friends, the people who are going to be trusting it is probably going to be pretty small. And the only people who should be using it is people who have some notion of trust in that initial issuer. And so that's why there's different types of BFT computers. There's some that are going to be like large scale, highly decentralized global computers like the Cosmos Hub, and then there'll be some which is just me and my friends.
But let's use maybe a different example. Let's use an example of one of these chains where it's super centralized. We know it's centralized, and and it is value bearing, and it's for some reason due to speculation and good marketing, people have like bought into it. They own these tokens. And what if like that central power starts to play around and they double spend? The question is like, if they don't mind destroying their own network, could they all of a sudden access a ton of funds in another chain? And like what you said there, it's like it's traceable, sure, but like if it's sort of bots trading, like nobody will notice, nobody will care if somebody's selling. Yeah, I mean tokens.
That's not any different than if like, even today, let's say Ripple decided to inflate the hell out of XRP, right? And, they could just dump it on the open market and like, I don't see how it's any different than what's already today.
It's sort of like if they could do that on a DEX right now.
Yeah, it's like they can already do that on a centralized
exchange.
So, it widens maybe the attack surface of DEXs, and so maybe it requires a little bit more education of users that you should be wary of the risks that you're taking. But we should already be doing that today, and I think we might be doing a little bit less of that today than we're supposed to be.
Would you say it is like a major a chain, and then we learn they've acted maliciously? What would happen? Like, what is the repercussions? What can the network do? Like, is there a way to cancel the bridge?
Yeah, so that's what I said.
Or the IBC.
Yeah, so when if you can get proof that that chain has forked or something, right? Then you can just cut off that bridge and say, okay, there's no more IBC connections happening. No more packets are going to flow back and forth from here. You can have governance on the chain, try to figure out what to do with it. Or you can say, okay, a chain, let's say it was like a legitimate fork, like, Ethereum Classic style fork. Well, in that case, Ethereum Classic is the real Ethereum, but, Ethereum had the improper state transition. But, let's say you had a fork like that, right? And then, you can say, okay, both of them can register new IBC connections, and then governance can figure out which one gets to act as the originator of the old one. Kind of like, when China broke up, right? The UN had to decide, okay, who gets its seat in the Security Council. Right, and so those kind of situations, you do get a little bit fuzzy, and you have to kind of rely on human social coordination.
Speaking of, I want to sort of switch gears and talk to you a little bit about validators and being a validator and being a staker. So, Cosmos is a proof of stake system, meaning
Cosmos Hub. Because you can use different chains in the Cosmos system can actually choose to use whatever security system they want. Like I said, you might have a chain that wants to be a permission validator set. Binance Dex, which is a chain that's building on Cosmos right now, on our software and intends to connect, they're currently running a completely permissioned validator set, and that's okay. You can have proof of stake systems interacting with permission systems. You can even have a proof of work system that interacts with the proof of stake system. So the Cosmos Hub is, and I really like proof of stake. And so I encourage people, if they're launching a chain on Cosmos, to use proof of stake, but there's no requirement to do that. So, but the Cosmos Hub blockchain, that is currently running on proof of stake.
And the Cosmos Hub is the one we talked about before. It's also acting as sort of like a relay point of, okay.
The goal is to make it the most secure proof of stake blockchain in the world.
Okay. But it's proof of stake.
It is.
And so when you talk about, this is actually really helpful, when you talk about being a validator on Cosmos, you're a validator on Cosmos Hub.
Yes, it's an unfortunate naming collision there.
Got it. So you're a validator on Cosmos Hub.
Yes.
Are there also validators then on that other one you just mentioned, the one in Asia?
Yep.
Cool. And it's a different,
there's some overlap. I actually have some Iris tokens myself, and my validator company is Sitco. We have our nodes synced up, and so as soon as I get back to San Francisco, we're gonna start validating on that chain as well.
Cool. Back to that though, you have atoms on the Cosmos Hub blockchain.
Yeah.
This is not only acting as a place for transaction to be relayed through or tokens to be checked, it's also acting, I guess, from what I'm understanding, as the governance area, the decision-making body.
For chains that want to delegate decision-making to the or to some level of decision-making to the Cosmos Hub.
Got it. Did you know when you started that you would be a validator?
No. So what actually happened was, so the company that I work for, which is Tendermint, it's a for-profit company that is contracted by the Interchain Foundation to write the software for Cosmos.
Hub.
For the Cosmos Hub, yes. As well as some work around IBC and whatnot. So, being a for-profit company, we did have the intention to, so as we're kind of approaching the end of our contract with the Interchain Foundation, basically the stuff that was laid out in the white paper, we're about to finish that all. And so Tendermint was actually considering running a validator itself. And then we decided that we think that Tendermint as a company has too much social reputation, that we might over-centralize the network. What happens if we accidentally get over 50% of the delegation? That would not be good. And so we kind of said, okay, Tendermint's not going to run a validator. We're actually going to allow a bunch of any employee that wants to can go out and create a new legal entity completely distinct from Tendermint, the company, and run a validator themselves. And so now we have there's about 5 validators that are created by Tendermint employees.
So you started a validator business.
Yes. And
what you would do is a validator stakes their tokens, and that secures it basically creates a security of the system and then pays you a small fee.
Yes.
The validator fee.
Yes. Rewards, and those rewards get sent to your delegators as well, and the validator can charge a additional commission rate if they so wish.
And the delegators would be other token holders that don't want to do the validator setup.
Yes.
Because actually, so this is what's I'm curious about this. So if you're a validator, you have a node, I imagine. You download some piece of software that allows you to validate on the Cosmos Hub. And you are kind of like locking your tokens into this every time you do it. So you cannot be day trading with them, and they're sort of like locked down. How long does it take to set it up?
So running a node is fast, but the part that's interesting is you have to run so as a validator, what you're doing is you're signing on blocks. And if you sign something incorrectly, whether you double sign or something, you can get slashed. And if you fail to sign blocks, you can get slashed. And so what you're really doing is you're running a hyper secure hotkey. And, you can go ask any exchange or custodian. That's not always a fun thing to do.
So in order to set it up, you'd have to do a small or some sort of hardware investment.
Yep.
Some sort of software setup. Get a security expert on it, maybe, or you're a security expert yourself. Make sure it works very well. Make sure that your internet connection is really good, because I guess you have to be there all the time.
Yep.
And then I'm guessing, stop me if I'm wrong, you push a button that says validate now, and it sort of automatically will do these signatures consistently. And the way that a validator is, so let's go really basic. Imagine there are 10 tokens that exist, and you have 2, and Zaki has 3, and someone else has 4. What happens for every round? Are you getting a chance to sign 20% of the time?
I will be signing every block.
Okay.
But I will be proposing the block 20% of the time.
And it's only the block proposer who gets the reward.
No, we split the reward not evenly, but amongst all the validators. The proposer gets a slight benefit, and there's an algorithm that we use to figure that out based off of other factors. But for the most part, it's split evenly amongst all the validators.
Okay, I think in my example, I've listed 3. We'll add a 4th to finish it off. So there's 4 validators as individuals with different amounts of token that they're staking. What's the breakdown like? You mentioned, so the proposer will get a small advantage, but then is it equal by 4?
It's the proposer will get a maximum of 5%. That depends on some other factors, and then the rest is split by stake.
Oh, so it is by stake. So then, but it would be the person who has the 40% would actually get more reward.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Being a validator, you have all the architecture in place. You can stake. You can get delegates, as you just mentioned, people with tokens who they don't necessarily have that set up. So they're like, oh, I'd rather you stake for me. They're kind of like your supporters.
Sure.
Or, you're not necessarily beholden to them, but they're trusting you.
Yes.
Maybe your constituents.
Yes.
And every time you get your block rewards, whatever percentage that is, you then you'll give it back to them, and you might take a small fee.
Yeah, but it automatically gets distributed. Like, for example, in Tezos, that doesn't happen.
Okay.
And there have been some validators that have run away with their delegators' funds. In the Cosmos SDK, what we've done is we've designed a system where it automatically does it, so I can't do that. We've minimized the risk to delegators.
Could someone take that SDK and change it, though?
Yep.
But then they would just have written like bad code that is malicious, and but it's like what you guys are providing.
Yep.
And like anyone who delegates could actually check to make sure that whatever is being used is in line with that. Okay. Right. What it sounds like right now is, so those 4 validators that I mentioned, they are already token holders. They're already Atom holders, and they're validating, and they're going to make some money on that. The question that automatically comes up is like, well, then wouldn't the rich just be getting richer? Like, if the one who has 4 out of the 10, she's always going to get a larger portion of the reward, the validation reward. So her share, her general wealth will be growing faster than yours will.
I mean, they will be growing at the same rate, right? Like, as long as we're all getting the same, she still has 40%, next block as she has this block.
Those who only stake sometimes, they will be losing out.
Yes, and so this is why we say atoms are not money. They're a staking token. I think it's a new type of asset in the crypto space where atoms are not money, and what we say to people is, if you're not staking your atoms, like,
you're losing.
You're losing out. Like, maybe we want some liquid just for price discovery, but otherwise the atoms should be staked. And we actually designed an inflation system that the fewer people that are staked, the inflation ramps up. So it's like, oh, you should be staking. What are you doing? Go stake. Look how much money you're losing out on.
That's interesting. And so that is, it's basically preventing people from holding.
Yep.
And sitting on it. And this is what you want.
Yes.
That's a motive, like that's an incentive that you wanted to put in.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, for us, for me in Cosmos, like, I think Bitcoin is money, and I want Bitcoin to be the money across main chains, or maybe other tokens like Grin or something, right? But atoms are not supposed to be the currency that people use. They should be staking.
Are you a little bit worried, though, about like creating a barrier to entry? Like right now, like what about the groups that want to enter later? I mean, the price to participate will get higher and higher. Wouldn't it? Like, in order to actually get anything that would be usable, you need to be there early.
That's true, maybe to an extent. But, if someone can come with first of all, there is enough atoms available on the public open market that you can buy them. And the other is that, if you're able to provide a really good product, like, Bison Trails, for example, is it's an industry grade custodian, and like, I know there's a lot of excitement around them and so if they're able to come in and provide a really good product, then they can attract delegators to delegating to them. And then there's other levers that, one of the other things with Cosmos is we really believe that validators are somewhat differentiated. We don't want there to be non-differentiated validators. And so, which Polkadot kind of has this assumption that like, oh, all validators are homogenous and like, they can just be shuffled across chains. One of the things that Cosmos Hub will do is like I said, once you can start staking on different chains, but validators can choose which chains they want to do shared security with. And so one of the things that delegators will look at, what chains is this guy like shared security with? Another thing that you could do is like, one thing that Sitka is planning on doing is currently we're charging 0% commission rate just to, help out people who but what we're going to do is when we start charging commission rate, we're going to put half of it send half the commission rate into a Sitka DAO that will be controlled by our delegators, and then they can use it to fund, one of the reasons, so I run this validator with Dave Oja, who he used to work at Tendermint, but now he focuses on doing some zero knowledge research with Alessandro Chiesa on this new zero knowledge proof system. So he does most of the security stuff he's been doing, like, security hacking and stuff for since high school. He and I got into this because one of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to take half of our commission rate and use it to fund open source public infrastructure that maybe isn't incentivized. So like we were thinking about like Tor relay nodes and IPFS nodes and like Bitcoin public nodes and stuff. And so but we're like, oh, instead of us doing that, like, we're trying to build this brand. It's like the people's validator. And so we were like, oh, let's give this to our delegators and let them vote on what they want us to fund. And like, if they want to just pay themselves dividends back from that commission rate, fine. But, I hope they do some cool stuff with it.
Do you think of it as a long-term play, or is this sort of like short-term because right now there's not that many validators and it's like a fast moneymaker? Because I have heard that is how some validators are thinking. They're like, cool, there's an amazing opportunity, but soon margins will become super small and like my percentage won't make sense. It won't be worth it. So let's just do it now and get out.
So Sika, we're taking a long-term view on this where we want to be like, I've been building proof of stake systems for the past 2 years. Like, I design a lot of this Cosmos proof of stake and, I really believe in this as a long-term thing. And so we want to continue being validators in the long term. And, we are scared that like, I know Poloniex already announced that they're going to start staking their atoms that are on their exchanges. Coinbase is going to start doing it soon too. And so we're worried about this. But Sika, our plan is finding a good niche where, that people's validator, like mantra that we're trying to push, that like, these are cutesy little things like the Sika DAO. And I actually minted these like little gold Sika coins that I'm going to be sending out to the delegators soon. It's like, these are just small cutesy things. But then like when you start doing all other stuff, like, new features like, providing maybe derivatives on staked atoms, for example. And when you do more complex stuff like this, then you can, I guess what really comes down to is finding a good niche for your validator.
Cool. So one thing we didn't get a chance to talk about that much here was governance and how the whole thing is maintained, but I don't think we have time. Yeah. So that we might need to do that another time. One other thing I'd love to do sometime is bring you together with some of the players in the other spaces so we can understand a little bit better how Cosmos is different from some of the other kind of interoperability plays out there. So the last thing I want to talk about is podcasting.
Yes.
Because you are co-host on a podcast that's in the same space. How have you liked it?
It's been great. I mean, I love it. So the name of the podcast is Epicenter, as many people probably know, but it's a lot of fun. Like, I have my head all in like proof of stake and interoperability. And so what the podcast does is every week it forces me to go learn something new every week. And so, like I said, teaching people is how I learn. And so, this podcast is sort of an educational experience. And so doing all the research for that and beforehand, it's a great way to teach people, but also learn myself.
Well, listen, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners, thanks for listening.